Are you the type of person who hears the word injury and you instantly resonate with that being you? If that's the case, then you're probably the type of person who lacks tolerance to training and has poor capacity. I regularly consult with patients in the clinic who come to see me because they're in pain or they're injured, and they've got this common excuse that this kind of training doesn't work for me or it doesn't like my body. And the problem with this thought process is it's actually not the training that's the problem, and it's also not your body that's the problem. It's just that the dosage you're giving yourself is wrong. You're either underloading it or you're massively overloading it, which the latter there is the more common, because that's when we start to see flare-ups. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to not be that person who says, this kind of training just doesn't work for me. And I'm going to show you how to be able to build a body that you can train hard with and not have to worry about breaking down on you on the regular. Okay, so first things first, what is training tolerance? This is the thing that you're probably lacking if you feel like you're getting injured all the time. So training tolerance is your ability to handle load and recover from it. And when I say load, I'm going to be talking specifically about training load today. Generally speaking, we talk about load, we can interchange that with the word stress. And stress is going to come from multiple different sources in our lives, but specifically for the context of this video, I'm going to be talking about training load and how we're going to build up tolerance to training load. Now, the thing about load tolerance is that it is changeable. You can train it and it's specific to what you do. So if you're a runner and you want to build tolerance to running, then you got to run. Sometimes doing other modalities can be helpful in terms of building like your general physical preparedness for that specific thing. But if you want to get better at running, ultimately you do have to run at some point. Now, the key here is that you need gradual, consistent exposure over time. You don't need to have this expectation of looking for a perfect exercise or looking for zero pain. Okay, step one. You need to establish a starting point. This is going to be your baseline. If you haven't done this and you don't know what your current level of tolerance is, then you need to find it. This level of tolerance that you find is not necessarily going to be 100% pain-free, but you need to find an amount of work that is manageable and something that you can recover from and something that you can repeat regularly. If you start way too high, you're going to know about it because whatever it is that you're currently dealing with is going to start flaring up on you. And these are the kind of people who, when they try to start building tolerance and something starts hurting, that's when they make the excuse of, this kind of training doesn't work for me, because you're just starting way above your baseline every single time, and you need to just try and drop the ego, pull it back a little bit more and start there. Have a little bit of patience and give yourself the time to build it up so that you don't become that person who just consistently makes the excuse of, this is just not for me, or this kind of training doesn't like my body. Step two, we need to apply consistent exposure. You need to repeat the level of load or work on the regular. You need to give your body the chance to adapt to it. This doesn't necessarily mean you need to progress every single session of every single week. You need to monitor your response before deciding to do that. A quick little story on that. I did have a patient once upon a time who decided that they were going to apply the 10% rule to their running training, which was great. However, they applied it in the context of adding 10% to every single session and not doing it every single week, which is the general consensus of how we use this rule. And you could understand that that did not go well for them. So things you need to avoid. You need to avoid constant changes in exercises, and you need to avoid regular spikes in training load. You need consistency, and the reason you need consistency is because it's going to help you be able to track your loading really, really cleanly, but it's also going to help you build some confidence, which is probably even more important for your ability to actually come back and enjoy that training process. Step three, building off step two, you need to monitor your response to this. You're going to have to track how your body responds. How is it feeling during the activity? How is it feeling after the activity and the next morning? And then how are you feeling once you've stacked up some consistent sessions? And how does that look over the course of a week? The weekly trends are probably the most important aspect you need to be tracking, which is why you also need to be tracking every single day so that you can look back and get an analysis of what your week looked like. The thing is, one single session does not define how you should be progressing. Most of the time, single sessions are just noise. The most important thing is how your sessions are stacking up. Remember, you're looking for patterns. You don't want to just search for perfection because it often doesn't exist. Step number 4, we want to progress gradually. We're only going to be increasing one single variable at a time. And you can choose whether you progress the volume, the intensity, or the frequency. You have to make sure that anything you do in terms of an increase is controlled and small. If you are feeling good, that is a good thing. But do not use feeling good as an excuse to push harder and do more, because that often results in some kind of flare up and then it sets you back further and puts you back in that negative mindset. Using it as an excuse to make big jumps in training load is just not on. Don't do it. Step number 5, make sure you're slightly undershooting. And by this I mean just stay underneath the limit. You don't want to feel like you're pushing up against the barrier every single time you're going to train. But you don't also want to avoid adding training load when all the signals are there saying that you can and probably progress that safely without things blowing up on you. You need to keep the work challenging but also manageable. And the reason you want to stay just below that break point is because this is where you're giving your body the work that's hard enough to allow you to adapt and progress, but it's not so hard that you're constantly just pushing up against that fatigue mark and not allowing yourself to recover from it. So if you're constantly feeling like you're at that break point, you're pushing yourself too far. Step number 6, you need to adjust when needed. If you feel like symptoms are spiking a little bit, then don't be afraid to reduce your loading. You don't have to worry about constantly doing more all the time, because constantly doing more does not equal that you're constantly getting better. Constantly doing more often means that you are just pushing up against the barrier of fatigue and not allowing that fatigue to offset by recovering. We need to work these things throughout our training consistently. And if you do have something flare up on you, you don't necessarily need to stop, you just need to pull back. If you're stopping and resting completely, that's when our tolerance is going to drop again. We need to avoid the boom-bust cycle at all costs. I have a video explaining what the boom-bust cycle is, which I'll link in the description below if you want to go back and watch that. But your goal is to keep building momentum in your favor. So make sure you adjust. This is super important. Don't just be this rigid trainee who is consistently having to do the same thing or more all the time. I just want to reiterate that because that's something I see on the regular and it brings people undone. Common mistakes. I've said this one at the start and I'm going to say it again, and it's starting with way too much volume. If you're an athlete, you just don't want to do less. It's in your nature to always want to be doing more or as much as you can because you seem to equate that with getting better. And often this mindset can be really good, and it's why high performers are high performers, because they need to just get a level of work in. But if it's bringing you undone, you need to just break the ego a little bit and pull it back and allow your body to rebuild that tolerance gradually so you can get back to where you need to be. The next point I want to make is that you're progressing too fast. This mistake, again, happens all the time. You think you do a level of work and instantly adapt to that, so you just jump it up on the next session. And this gets back to my patient who said that they were applying this 10% rule to every single session. Just don't be that person. You need to review what you're doing across the course of the week, and then at the end of the week, that's when you start to make that decision. Do I progress on the next week? If you can confidently say yes, add a little bit more. If you're on the fence, not sure, or genuinely deep down know that you shouldn't progress, just don't do it. It doesn't hurt to keep things the same for multiple weeks in a row if the signals aren't pointing to progression. The next mistake that I want to point out is changing too many variables at once. If you're the kind of person who's going to go to the gym twice and run 3 times this week, then don't change your program next week to going to the gym 5 times and running once. how on earth could you possibly track that consistently and know where you're going to go next? The next mistake is avoiding pain at all costs. Pain is an inevitable thing. It's going to happen regardless of whether you're injured or not. So you need to just make sure that pain is managed well. You don't need to avoid it or have zero of it. Next mistake is pushing through absolutely everything. This is a massive mistake. I've seen a lot of clients in the clinic who make this mistake, and the reason that they've become my clients is because they're making this mistake. It never works well, so just don't do it. Okay, so I've laid all of these things out for you. The next thing I want you to know is what good progression looks like. Good progression is not perfectly linear. I mentioned before that you can have weeks where you do the same thing and you can stack up, 2, 3, maybe 4+ weeks of the same level of work if you're still getting an adaptation from it. And the signals don't necessarily tell you can progress yet, but you don't either need to regress. So it's not necessarily linear. You need to also remember that fluctuations in workload and how you feel are normal. As long as you're not getting these huge spikes in training load and you're not getting these massive flare-ups in pain or re-injury on the regular. If you're seeing gradual increases in your tolerance and capacity to do work, and you're seeing gradual increases in your confidence to do this work, then you're on the right path. The best way to look at it is from a month-to-month standpoint, okay? So I say use the weekly review to decide whether or not you're going to progress, but look back over each month as to how you were going last month. And if this month you're doing a lot better than the last month, or even a little bit better than the last month, then that's great. You're in the right direction. So you don't need to change things dramatically. You just need to have patience and consistency. Trying to have this monthly approach is a good thing, especially if you're someone who deals with recurring injuries or you have persistent pain. Make sure that your viewpoint is that you're building tolerance to the things that matter to you, and stop worrying about whether or not things hurt. You can't just be there all the time saying, man, I'm still in so much pain. When is this pain going to go away? You need to change your focus to tolerance and what's manageable and what's not, and keep building around those things. So use this framework. Building tolerance is not complicated. I've just laid all of this out for you in a relatively simplistic format, but it does require you to be consistent. It requires you to be disciplined, and it especially requires you to have patience. If you follow a simple method like the one I've laid out here for you, then you're giving yourself every chance to adapt and have success in getting back to the things that you want to do, whilst of course minimizing your injury risk or re-injury risk. If you are someone who sees themselves as injury prone, or you have no tolerance to training, then you likely need to just take progress a little bit slower and be a little bit more patient. Or you could be the type of person who just forces this all or nothing principle upon themselves. And to learn more about this all or nothing principle, you should click on this video here, because it's going to help you understand what this is all about and how to fix that problem with your training.